I'm Trish Costello. I'm the CEO and founder of Portfolio, and we are now launching today a new series called The Founder's Journey. As we know, we're all here because we're motivated and so excited to be a part of the vision of these amazing entrepreneurs that we're backing. And in fact, we've now done 50 investments, so we have quite the portfolio of companies. So we're going to begin, starting today, on a monthly basis, having an opportunity not just to learn about the business, but to go a little deeper and learn about the entrepreneur behind that business, about their vision for the future, about how they're working to change the world and what brought them here today. So this is that opportunity for a little deeper dive, for a half hour or more to sit down and just go a little deeper and then turn it over to you for questions. The other thing that we're doing today is, and as you've seen over the last couple of months, is that we're spotlighting a number of our members as well, who are fabulous leaders around the world, and actually putting them in that opportunity, that position to get to know those entrepreneurs a little better. As many of you know, the secret success of Portfolio isn't really just the lead partners, and certainly not myself, but it's that strength of the partners, of the members that are a part of our funds. And there are now thousands of us that are coming together, backing the entrepreneurial companies that we want in the world. Now, I have an opportunity today to introduce someone that I hold in the highest regard and that I have the honor to call a friend, and that's Lisa Skeete Tatum. I've known Lisa now for, gosh, she won't like me to say this, but over 20 years.
No need to go there. No need to.
Known Lisa for over 20 years. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Lisa is the founder and CEO of Landit, a personalized career pathing platform created to increase the success and engagement of women and diverse groups in the workplace. Now, I do know about Landit, but I do want to make sure I get this exactly right. The platform offers a turnkey, one-size-fits-one solution that enables companies to attract, develop, and retain diverse, high-potential talent. And this is also a venture-backed company that Lisa's running. So she has been on the entrepreneur venture-backed side, but Lisa also had over a 10-year career as a venture capital general partner at Cardinal Partners, which is a $350 million early stage healthcare venture capital firm. And Lisa doesn't brag about this on her bio. She doesn't even mention it, but Lisa was actually a venture capitalist on the Midas list, which is the 100 top venture capitalists in the world. So when we're talking about an investor, we're talking about an investor that has been really at the top of this game. Lisa also worked for Procter & Gamble, GE Capital, founded her own consulting practice. She's been on multiple high-profile boards, including public boards like Stryker, Union Square Hospitality Group, and was on the board of trustees, or still is, of Cornell, where she received her undergraduate degree in chemical engineering, and the deans, or the Harvard Business School Board of Deans Advisors. So Lisa has had an amazing background and an amazing career. She is also a member of the Kauffman Fellows. She was in class 4, and she is a 2012 Henry Crown Fellow of the Aspen Institute. She's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Fast Company, Vanity Fair, Fortune, you name it, Lisa has been out there. And she is a phenomenal women's leader, a phenomenal leader, period, but has just been such a wonderful role model globally for women. So Lisa, I'm so thrilled to have you here. I've been trying to pull you in for a long time, so thrilled to have you in front of all of our members and to do this interview with the wonderful Wole Coaxum. I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tricia. From now on, you must travel with me because I never get that kind of intro. So you had me at yes, but I am just so thrilled to be a part of this. What a pleasure and a treat and a privilege to be able to have a fireside chat, if you will, with Wole. And so we're going to get right into it. This is a critically important topic, and he has a very innovative way of solving this massive societal need. So his resume is stellar, both professionally as well as personally and civic minded. So I think we're going to actually have Wole tell us his story a little bit, and we're going to get right into it. So you started your career on Wall Street and achieved incredible success, managing director at JP Morgan, CFO and COO at Willis North, Citigroup, trustee at Philip Exeter, husband to Kim, dad to Quinn and Avery. That's what I always start with. So why on earth did you take that leap? Because I know I felt like I took a leap.
Yeah.
Off the cliff to start this amazing venture. So tell us about your journey.
That's a great question. First, I really want to thank everyone for the chance to visit with you today. And it's a real honor to have Portfolio within our cap table. And it means a tremendous amount, and we're doing everything every day to deliver a good return to our investors. The journey to entrepreneurship is a circuitous one for me. And I started my career, just fell into the banking world, but was fortunate enough to sit and learn from some of the titans of financial services in this country, including some names you might be familiar with, like Sandy Weil, Jamie Dimon, Charlie Scharf was actually my first boss out of college, and Heidi Miller, and others. And they, I was fortunate just to be able to learn a variety of different aspects of financial services, both at Citigroup, then at Willis, and then most recently in a big company at JP Morgan. But I had my George Floyd moment at the time of the death of Michael Brown. And for me, it was, here I am with all this great experience, doing well by some measures, financially and personally, but sort of felt as if I wanted to be a part of the conversation, to have an impact, and from the community that I come from, and realized I knew it all along actually, but I realized that the JP Morgan platform, although it's a very special place and it has tremendous impact in this country, 1 out of 2 Americans is a customer of JP Morgan on the consumer side. What about the other 1 out of 2 that are not? And it just occurred to me that I have been blessed with so many experiences and relationships. How can I be a part of the conversation that I thought was missing, quite frankly, which was, what's the economic justice agenda for communities of color, particularly Black people, when we're so well entrenched in the social justice agenda? And I thought, I'd rather end my career trying to solve this important problem and fail than to not try at all. And so that was step 1 in my own journey to get to this place. And then step 2 in my journey was really a little bit serendipitous. I thought about 3 strategies, if you will. 1 was to buy a bank. The second was to start a fund to invest in companies that would fulfill this mission. And the third was to start a company. And it so happens that one of my friends
of starting a company. You took the easy way.
I took the easy way. Well, yeah, I took the easy way. Well, I took the route. Someone said to me, Wole, I sort of intellectually made the decision that I wanted to leave, thinking it through. And he said, well, he was an insurtech investor and a friend and a mentor. And he said, I've invested in a lot of entrepreneurs, but and you have all the trappings of an entrepreneur. And I said, really? You think so? He said, oh, absolutely. You should try it. And I'll be your partner in the process from a fundraising perspective and a thought partner. And that was the push, if you will, that I needed to step out on the tightrope, 40,000 feet in the air with no net underneath. And it's been a wonderful opportunity because I have a chance to wake up every day thinking about how to solve big issues, knowing that I have a wonderful support network that's growing, quite frankly, in this journey. So that's how I got here.
And what you're articulating is exactly what most of us believe in, which is very few people wake up saying, I want to be an entrepreneur, right? Because it's just too darn hard. Right. It is, you have to have a bigger true north, where you decide the status quo is no longer, I can't live with it, right? It's no longer sufficient. And so you're driven by that, which I love, right? Because it's that authenticity that powers you through. So
That's exactly right.
love it. Whew, can you tell I have the battle scars? So tell us more about the evolution of MoCaFi, which for those of you who may not know, it stands for Mobility Capital Finance. So you founded this at your moment. Tell us more about it.
Sure. So Mobility Capital Finance came about, actually, just a parenthetical story, because one of the portfolio members was very instrumental in my journey. So after my first mentor said, you should try this, my second mentor, who's Marla Blow, and a member of portfolio, love Marla. And I spent a lot of time talking to her about her journey as an entrepreneur, moving from the CFPB to starting her company, and really trying to understand the challenges, particularly in the underserved space. So, and from her good mentorship and conversation, figured out that we need to come up with, I needed to come up with another way to provide banking services to underserved communities, and walked away with the premise basically that said, hey, if you've got a large market and you're able to deliver a high quality product to that market, you have an opportunity to build something special. And so what we have learned, we started the company in 2016, and we have really positioned ourselves to fill a void that exists in this country, which is, how do you provide high quality banking services to the parts of our society that traditional banks don't serve well? And the banking industry, if you will, and I put that in air quotes, that serves this community are the payday lenders, the pawn shops, the check cashers, and that's $180 billion a year industry and growing. And you've got 50% of both Hispanic Americans and African Americans, and I also think it's true for rural white Americans, are unbanked or underbanked. So the thought process that we have is, if we can provide a quality banking product that looks like what we call in the traditional banking industry, a product that's similar to the mass affluent, where you can put money into your account for free, whether it's a check or cash, we can take money out of your account for free. There's such a need. And oh, by the way, if you wrap some financial literacy around that conversation, and if you give people opportunities to build credit, and if you give people opportunities to create wealth, then you have a chance to have a game where people can use the platform and it doesn't extract value, but adds value. And so that's what we've been very much focused on. And I think really what made the portfolio team interested in our story, above and beyond sort of what I just described, is we are doing something pretty innovative in terms of our partnerships with cities. And so city strategy for us is one where we think it's kind of different, where we are able to partner with municipalities, transform their municipal ID cards, and when the card is issued, and for those of you who may not be familiar with municipal ID cards, many cities across the country, particularly those with diverse populations, have created municipal ID cards so individuals who are undocumented in particular can feel safe in the communities where they live. Because with this municipal ID card, which is issued by the mayor's office, allows someone to go to the school and pick up their kids without having to worry about being picked up by the police, or even if they're pulled over by the police, they have an ID that allows them to not have to worry about being deported. The innovation that we've come up with is that same know your customer, if you will, the same material that you use to get that ID card is the same material, that's information that you need to provide to get a bank account. And by bringing those two things together, we can issue an ID card with banking services, and then that gives a city a way of providing value to its residents, as well as a way for the resident to engage more with the city. So what does that mean? That means that in a time of COVID, when you have families that are eligible for the CARES Act funds, they actually have an opportunity to get a bank account, to have an electronic deposit of that $1,200 or $2,400 if it's a couple, or $500 for each child, as opposed to having to wait for a gift card to show up, as
That's right.
opposed to having to wait for a check to show up that they got to risk their lives to leave their house to go to the check casher, to have that $1,200 become something less than that because someone is charging them for access to their own money. So what we're finding is the MoCaFi platform, which let's get people banked. And there's, the average African American spends $40,000 more in their lifetime for banking services than their counterpart. An African American spends 50% more a month versus their white counterpart. A Hispanic spends 100% more a month for banking services. So that's giving someone a bank account. Although it sounds so basic, it's a game changer. And then the second thing is what we're focused on is how do we help people build their credit? And we do that through rent payments, reporting those to the credit bureaus. And we're very fortunate to have a very strong relationship with Equifax. And there's a new CEO of their consumer business, a woman by the name of Beverly Anderson. If you don't know her,
I know Beverly.
She's fabulous. And she left Woles and was taking on this great new challenge. And I'm not surprised that you know Beverly, because I know I'm in the room with all the power players. So I often
entrepreneurs, yes.
And so I often call myself a pip amongst people like yourself, who's Gladys Knight.
I'm Gladys. I'll take it.
But with Beverly's partnership, we are spending some time trying to take the credit file and bring rent payments, utility payments, and other things, because for this population that we're so focused on and cared so deeply about, we recognize that there's credit redlining that has emerged and happened in this country for a very long time. And people pay their rent on time and they pay their cell phone bill on time, but those payments are not reflected in their credit score, which can be the determinant if they can get a job. It's a determinant in terms of what their cost of insurance is going to be, credit card costs, and obviously mortgages and the like. So we are really trying to bring that level of innovation to the consumer. So that's what MoCaFi is all about, because if we're successful, we'll get people banked, we'll help them build their credit, and at the same time, we're going to help them on the journey of creating wealth. And we see that in the perspective of how do you allow an individual to get the kind of financial coaching they might need for be a first-time home buyer, or maybe they lost their home at the time of the last financial crisis, they need to come back into that, or they want to be an entrepreneur themselves. And so we're really building an ecosystem that's driven with high-quality products that also gives us data. And so the value proposition that we see over time is an ability to bring many people into the financial mainstream in this country. And we think just in the Black community alone, that's a $50 billion industry. And if we're able to expand it into the Hispanic community, to the rural white community, who knows where this thing can go, and set the trend for everybody else. And there's something to be said about a first mover advantage, because if you think about the businesses that are out there today, very few that are focused on this segment. I'll tell you, the CEO of Chime was on MSNBC about 3 weeks ago. He said explicitly, we are not focused on unbanked individuals. I can't think of a target population that is more worthy of being targeted than unbanked individuals, because they are a market that has been neglected. And so with that attitude, I'm very happy about him saying that, because that just clears the lane for us to really grow.
And what I love about your business model, it's the same scale and urgency and metrics. And yes, you're mission driven, but many people think it's either mission driven or it's a great opportunity.
Correct.
And it's not an either or, it's an and.
Correct.
So would love any additional thoughts on that, because it is good business. And yes, it's good for society as well.
That's exactly right. I think one of the traps that I worry many investors fall into is pattern matching. And I commend Portfolio for not falling into that trap, but it's an ability to, I think the great investors have an ability to see the future as it could be, as opposed to as it is or as it has been. And to the extent that there has not been many examples of companies that have done well by doing good in a VC capacity, that many investors are reticent to make that kind of investment and bet on a company like MoCaFi. But I think Portfolio sees it, Radical Impact sees it, many New York Venture Partners sees it, because, and I think that's where you get the outsized return. And so
Absolutely.
it is possible to do well by doing good, but you do well if you have a high quality product. You do well if it's a large market, a large addressable market. You do well if people are better off after engaging with you than before they were engaging with you. And I think society is shifting. As you see what's happening in the world today, particularly the United States, a sense of, particularly for young people who are coming out of college and thinking about how they want to spend their lives and what they want to focus on, it's important that it's not just a paycheck. I mean, obviously paychecks are important, and that allows us to take care of ourselves and our family responsibly. But people want to feel a passion when they get up and zoom into work that day, if you will, for those of us who that's how we live. And even those of us who are not able to do that, we want to have a sense of being a part of something greater than ourselves. And I think that corporates, not just the startup community, are wrestling with that issue of how do you do well by doing good, because just by doing well by a traditional measure of shareholder value, I don't think is going to be enough anymore for the great companies to use as a benchmark of their impact in the world. And I think sort of, we happen to fall into that. And, as you and I know, we've been at this game long enough, it's just good business. And you talk about my family and my two daughters who are fabulous, and my wife is fabulous. One of the things about being an entrepreneur, two things about being an entrepreneur that I've learned from a personal perspective. One is that you can't be a successful entrepreneur. I mean, you can, I guess, but if the family isn't supportive, because there's just too many. I'm sure your experience with what you're building would lend the same thing. If people don't understand, or they may understand it, but if they're not supportive of it, and you have these moments of doubt, and you have these moments of insecurity. And I'll never forget when I said to my wife, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting a company." She said, "You know what? Do that. I know what your passion is. I know how unhappy you've been in the JP Morgan environment in terms of what else you could do. Go do this, and I'm 100% behind you." So that is just, if someone's thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, and I think actually being an investor, starting a fund, it's no different, because you're also standing on a tightrope 40,000 feet in the air with no net. You need to have that family support. And the other thing, and this is particularly interesting for I have two young girls, and as a role model for them, the power of entrepreneurship and the conversation of, what does dad do, is different when I talk about what I'm doing. And it gets them thinking about, oh, I could do that too. Let me think about this. Let me think about that. And so it's just a different conversation. And I also think, and it's true for the Portfolio community as it is for myself, which having individuals who represent a different image, doing such interesting and important work, it's fulfilling, but it also sets a tone for the next generation. Because I feel like what we're doing is we're running a relay race, and it's a long relay race, and each of us has our place in the race. We're holding the baton, but we're running so we can pass the baton to the next generation. And I think about that as I build my company. I know you within Portfolio think about that as you make investments. We're just running our leg of the race as we pick up from our ancestors and we move it forward to the next generation. So that's also part of what I think about is with this company that we're building institutions and we're running our leg of the relay race.
So many things you said resonate with me. You know, I use the phrase a lot that you have to surround yourself with people that have higher expectations of you than you have of yourself, because we're all on that journey. And there are definitely those moments when you're like, 3 in the morning, did I do the right thing? What the heck was I thinking?
That's exactly
and when you go on this journey, your family comes with you, right?
Absolutely.
So, right. And it's one of the most isolating, lonely things. But again, you're driven by a bigger true north, if you will.
Exactly right. Exactly.
And so that's also the beauty of Portfolio, which is it's a network and no one changes the world. We're both on this mission to change the world. You can't do that alone, right? So you got to surround yourself. If you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, this Portfolio network is just bad. Oops, I almost cursed. It's bad in a good way.
Yeah,
so you
absolutely.
got to surround yourself with those folks. I love it. So speaking of pattern recognition, funding for founders of color. So we know less than 1% goes to Black founders, less than 0.2% goes to Black women, of which, of course, I am in that club. So a lot of people missing out. How do they think about that? Now it's like the flavor du jour. Everyone wants to have an initiative as opposed to the very authentic way that Portfolio started from the beginning.
Right. Yeah, I think funding is, it really is calling out for more folks like Portfolio, either people participating in the Portfolio platform or creating their own version of Portfolio, to make sure that people like yourself and like myself get a fair shake, if you will, from an investor perspective. And it's hard to have conversations with people who don't necessarily understand the cultural context that you come to solving a problem. And I knew relatively early on in the fundraising process that the type of investor that would make sense for our first round, we've done 2 sort of rounds, if you will. We did a convertible note, which was a rolling note, which we raised about $3 million, which I joke was from friends and family. It was enough money from a friend to help us keep the business going, but not enough money to ruin a friendship. And so we were able to raise money that way. And that was really people saying, hey, Wole, I hear you. I know your experience. I trust you, and I want to be supportive.
That's right. Betting on you is the first round, right?
Completely. And the second round came from more institutional investors who said, hey, I get this. I see where you're going, and we want to be supportive of that. And it fulfills a business mission, and it fulfills an overall social mission, what we talked about previously. And I realized that I always talked to the venture people, the sort of traditional venture capitalists, because I always wanted to know how they thought about the world. I always wanted to know what the criticisms were. I always wanted to know what the metrics that they were thinking about, because I believe that those are important components, and the KPIs are ones that we want to follow. But at the same time, I knew they probably wouldn't invest in the company because they weren't able to pattern match. So it just highlights, and I had this conversation actually with somebody as recently as 2 weeks ago when they were giving me advice. It's a big fun. It's a friend. Someone's been with us for a long time. She said, hey, you should do this, this, and this, so you'll be more attracted to the venture capitalists. And I said, if you're asking me to basically package ourselves in a way that fits the previous model, we're not going to do that, because I think that misses the opportunity. And that will allow us to be substandard in terms of, or suboptimized, excuse me, in terms of the opportunity. And once I explained that to her, she's like, got it. You've got to go down this journey because you're creating a new path, and you have to bring people along with you who get that. And I actually think that in this moment of post-George Floyd murder and the awakening that this country is having, and some of us have got the awakening early and others are just coming to the party. I hope that those statistics that you just quoted change. They should change because there seems to be a national conversation and commitment to that, but time will tell. But in the meantime, Portfolio and others will continue to make good bets on diverse founders. And you've seen the statistics in terms of traditional portfolio management, that those companies that have diverse leadership teams outperform. You've seen the statistics that those startups with diverse founders can outperform. And so as that dirty little secret becomes less of a secret, I'm hopeful that more people will put their money into folks like you and I and the next generation, because I'm a little worried. The next folks in the relay race, the younger people might be faster than we are. So we got to run as hard as we can now. But I'm optimistic that it'll get better, but it's not going to be without some intentionality to ensure that the dollars get to the communities that we represent.
Throughout the entire food chain. I mean, I always tell founders, having been on the dark side myself, that you got to do your homework, right? And you got to realize who you're partnering with. How do they show up when things go sideways, as well as when they're going well? Right. And what I tell investors and others, you have to be proximate to who you serve. And when you think about these massive markets, massive opportunities, the old way of looking at things is no longer sufficient. And by the way, people have a choice many times, right? And they're going to be choosing the right partners and who is going to help them accelerate their time to goal. So I could not agree more. So I know entrepreneurship is quite the journey. Tell us about some of those hard fought, learned lessons, because no one's journey just does this as you're trying to change the world. So tell us the PG version of some of those.
Absolutely. No, I haven't started drinking yet, so I'm not going to give you the longer version. But the trees don't grow to the sky, so that's absolutely true. And being a first-time entrepreneur, if you will, is an experience. And I think if you layer on top of that, being a first-time entrepreneur who's an African-American, who also
not 21.
Who's not 21, that's right. It's exactly right. The older entrepreneur. When I started this journey, I was 46 years old. I think actually played to my benefit in terms of the age piece. Because I had just seen some things interesting. I was talking to a young person just this afternoon who started a company out of Stanford, pattern matching, out of Stanford, medical device company, white kid, was able to raise $1 million relatively quickly and is trying to figure it out, different trajectory. And he made the observation, he said, you know what? I did not have the managerial experience that was necessary to pull off what I was trying to accomplish. That issue I didn't have, actually. So, having managed teams globally and thousands of people, had the mindset. So I actually think that's not to say that younger entrepreneurs don't have advantages in seeing things and being able to create real value. That's not what I'm suggesting. But I am suggesting that older entrepreneurs have some of the battle scars, to use your words earlier, that I think can enable you to weather some of the more challenging times of being an entrepreneur. And one of the things I've learned in my corporate experience is things are never as good as they think they are, or they sound like, and things are never as bad as they may seem. And that context is, there are challenging times from an entrepreneurial perspective. Is how are you going to, are we going to really raise the money that we're going after, or we've got this big contract, or how are we able to continue to punch above our weight? And so, one of the mistakes I made was a sense of being overly inclusive. I think I had too many founders when I first started, and I had it all mapped out in terms of roles that people played, and I hadn't worked with some of these people before, and I realize now sometimes you're better to stay lean and mean as long as possible, and then over time, as you sort of settle into the role, that you want to expand the team. And not that the people that I was working with were bad people; they're great people and still my friends. But I wasn't at a place to really optimize their effectiveness because of the age and stage of the company. So it's always important to understand what age and stage you're at. The other lesson that I've learned is time and money as an entrepreneur are like oxygen, and without them, you're dead. And so it's very important to be able to manage appropriately to those two precious assets of time and money, because they're hard to it's hard to manage through that. And the other thing that I've really come to believe strongly in this journey is you have to have a little faith. In fact, you have to have a lot of faith. And the faith comes from, obviously being talented in what you do, obviously having a well-defined game plan, obviously having the best people around you that you can, obviously having an ability to articulate the vision, because many things about the entrepreneurial journey is about storytelling. You've got to create an image.
Number one skill, by the way, besides all the other things, is you're selling all the time.
You're selling.
Everyone, even when you can't see, they can't see it. That's your number one.
I feel like, Death of a Salesman has become my favorite book, my favorite play. Call me Willie Loman. But you do all those things, but you're still creating something from whole cloth. And you've got to believe that what you're doing, even in the most challenging times, that you've done everything right, and good things will happen. And it is a little bit of a cliche that you make your own luck. But the reality is, if you're a person who wants everything to be really neat and tidy and organized from A through Z in a perfect column, and you can't operate well with uncertainty, entrepreneurship may not be the right path for you, because it'll just cause too much anxiety. The reality is, even in the corporate sector, when I was there, uncertainty was, I used to, when I did a lot of mentoring to young people, I said, you got to own that like a warm blanket, because things aren't always as crisp and clean as you'd like them. And the reality is, as an entrepreneur, you just multiply that by 100. And so you've got to have faith that what you're putting in place is the right path. Obviously, you got to pivot, and you always have to be taking it. And that's the other thing. Always be listening and taking feedback and doing a self-assessment. Not that everything that you hear you got to do, but if you don't hear it and process it and put it up against what you're doing, I think you're missing a real gift. And I like to say that feedback is a gift. And so anyway, but the big thing is just faith, because if you don't have faith, it's really easy to give up. And the reality is, you can't win if you're not in the game. And whenever I sort of feel like, geez, have I done the right thing? Or geez, why did I give this up or give up the corporate job and do this? I'm reminded of two things. One, that I'm working on something that's greater than myself. And two, that our community, broadly defined, needs risk takers like you, like myself, like the folks here within Portfolio, because without those risk takers, the world's not going to change. And you have to sort of move. You have to push up against a ball moving in another direction. That's not a great analogy, but the idea is you've got to sort of go into the world and shape it as you want it to be, because the world's not going to do it for you. So anyway, all those are some of the things that I've learned in my journey. And the other thing that I've also come to appreciate is when somebody reaches out and says, thanks for what you're doing, and what you're doing is making a difference. And in the past, you might say, oh yeah, it's not a big deal, whatever, thanks. But now those words, when said with heartfelt appreciation, mean a lot. And I use that as real inspiration. And the other thing I would say is and we should take some questions, because I can just go on for a long time.
But yes, we will.
But the other thing I would say is, one of the things that I think is so wonderful about what investors can do and what entrepreneurs can do is create opportunities for other people. So my team is a very diverse team, and parts of it look like Wakanda, right? I mean, my head of technology is a Black woman. My head of municipal sales and corporate sales is a Black woman. My head of marketing is a Black man. His team consists of two Black women and a Black man, or two Black men actually. I have my head of my legal department is a white guy who used to be at the Rush Card, and he's fabulous. And so we're just able to have a very diverse group of people. And when I was in the corporate sector, I often said, we don't need to have a diversity committee. Just put the people who in charge who are diverse, and that will solve your diversity issue. And so part of what I enjoy
the head of diversity, like that's their job.
That's their job. And you don't need a committee. You need just put diverse people in big jobs, and the whole place will sort of work. And so I enjoy that's a little bit of a social experiment that I have within MoCaFi, because diversity is not something we spend a lot of time talking about, because it's there and people understand that. And the other thing, particularly, and part of the reason that I sort of went on this journey, was this concept of what's worse, being unemployed or underemployed. And your experience, your academic experience, your work experience puts you in a place where you can do quite a bit. And I think in the corporate environment, it works in part because it requires many people in that environment to be very focused on what they're doing, and may not require they use all their skill sets. And I felt that was very limiting, quite frankly. And I felt I was underemployed, and I wanted to be stretched. And I thought the only way I was going to stretch myself is if I created the environment. That being said, I find myself bringing on individuals who also have been underemployed in their previous roles, and now I'm giving them opportunities to stretch. And there's nothing more satisfying than getting people to achieve beyond what they thought was possible for themselves. And I think it's particularly true for women and for people of color in corporate settings, where oftentimes the expectations of those of us is not so high. And as a result, we're not fulfilling our greatest potential. And as investors and entrepreneurs, we go from, doing windows to doing sales pitches to going to the stock exchange with a publicly traded company that we're launching, if it all goes well, potentially. That allows us to use all of our skill set and really be fully employed.
And I'll tell you that, that's why my whole company exists, right? How do you democratize career success and give everyone a chance to bring the full measure of their talent? And we have so many questions. Holy cow, people on fire. So we'll definitely get to them. But one thing I will say is, as an investor, I'm not sure, but also investor, is this is a time where people have to be activated, right? We talk about you can't be silent. You can't kind of be sitting on the sidelines. You can't be ambiguous with your commitment. Right. Same thing when you're an investor, right? You're activating your network. You're activating your thoughts and your resources and things of that sort. And now is the time. So I believe we're going to go to some questions. So Trish, are you going to help us here, or how shall we?
Sure, happy to do that. So, well, let me just jump in. I'll go down just from the top. So Jesse asks both of you, what books are you reading right now, or what books have you read that really changed the way you think?
I'll let ladies go first on that one.
Reading. So right now I'm actually rereading Just Mercy with my kids. So that is what I am doing right now. There's everything that's going on in the world. There's everything I'm experiencing. And there's also the fact that I'm a mom of a 17-year-old and a soon to be 19-year-old, two beautiful Black boys in this country. And so that's where I am focused at the moment.
Yeah. That's a good book. My daughter's also reading that too. She's got a summer project that requires her to talk about the incarcerated. So she's reading that.
Tell me a little bit about the book for those who don't know it.
So it essentially talks about a gentleman in the South who was wrongly accused of a crime, incarcerated, and it's just symptomatic and an example of the mass incarceration of Black and Brown men in particular in this country, and the gentleman's journey at Bryan Stevenson to free him. So,
and it's a movie that's also a very good watch. It's a good question about books. I actually go through a lot of books, and I actually do a lot of Audible reading. My wife's like reading, but I do go through a lot of Audible books. And I'm a bit of a historian, and I spend a lot of time. I read the Frederick Douglass biography that came out recently is a very good read that I highly recommend. The other book, I'm trying to think of books that had the most impact in my life. It's actually a long list, but the one that I recommend at the moment is the Frederick Douglass biography, as an inspiration in terms of what the impact that one individual can have on the country. I mean, people don't know this, but Frederick Douglass was probably the second most famous person in America from the 1850s to the end of the 19th century. He almost ran for president. Talked about him running for vice president. So anyway, he's a pretty inspirational figure.
Absolutely.
I'm going to move on because there's so many. And in the chat, you may have noticed, but people are going, how can it be that minority groups are paying so much more in banking fees? And what a terrible burden. Can you talk more about that, and why are minority groups paying so much more?
So that's can be a topic for another conversation. I would encourage everyone to read a book called How the Other Half Banks, which is a good history lesson in banking in this country. But I think it comes down to a couple of things. I think the traditional financial markets don't have a product that's appropriate for the consumer, and by that I mean traditional banking relies on people leaving balances in their accounts, and the LMI, or low to moderate income consumer, is a transactor. Money comes in, money comes out. And so the idea of being able to make money on balances that pays for the branch infrastructure, it pays for the tellers that sit in that branch. There's just not enough money generated from the consumer to justify that. And oftentimes, because that consumer is a cash-oriented consumer, they often spend more time in the teller line. And those of you who've been in the banking industry know that teller transactions are timed by management to figure out how to make those transactions more efficient, because the less time a teller spends with the customer means you have a more efficient relationship with that customer. And so what the banks have ended up doing is they said, okay, got it. The low-end customer is a cash-driven customer. They take up more time in the line. They are not leaving balances. So we're going to charge overdraft fees as a way to penalize someone for not having high balances. We're going to charge check cashing fees, essentially, at some banks, if you come in and you want to cash a personal check. And when you put those dollars together, the average, and they don't have high balances. And remember, most accounts are, if you have a certain balance, then you don't get charged a fee. But if your balance goes below a certain dollar amount, then they're going to charge you fees. So the average white person spends $8 a month on a banking relationship. Average Black person spends 12, and the average Hispanic spends 16 because of overdraft fees, because of fees related to going to cash a check, because they don't meet minimum balances. And it really is a way of using pricing to dissuade certain kinds of customers from coming into the bank. So that's my assessment in terms of why we are where we are.
And just to kind of stick with that, Sheila Collins, and shout out to Sheila from AARP Innovation Lab, one of our collaborators. But Sheila says, what's the biggest challenge to get the unbanked to actually trust in financial products?
That's a great question. So I think that word trust is so important. I had the good pleasure before COVID hit to be a part of an event that celebrated 150 years of the Freedmen's Bank. And Secretary Mnuchin was the host, and we had a chance to, I was on a panel with a distinguished group of bankers and fintech entrepreneurs. And the history of the Freedom Bank, if those of you don't know, the time that Lincoln freed the slaves, when he was discussing the 40 acres and a mule, he also created a bank, which became the place that freed slaves, as well as those who fought in the Union Army, could put their deposits and start banking. And it was a part of bringing Black people into the financial system, freed Black people. And that bank had over 100,000 depositors. It had the equivalent of $125 billion in deposits in 2020 dollars. And it was poorly managed. And folks thought that it had the backing of the US government, and it didn't. But the folks put their money in, they were very diligent, and the board ended up being very speculative. It got so bad they tried to bring Frederick Douglass in, who didn't really know anything about banking, but they used his reputation to try to hold it together. Ultimately, it failed. And I believe that was the beginning of the end of the relationship that the Black community has with banking services in this country. And it's only exacerbated. It's not that long ago that we had the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, which highlighted the level of discrimination, for lack of a better word, and targeted predatory lending that occurred, particularly in the Black community, and people lost their homes. And so that just sort of reinforced an already skeptical group that they should be even more skeptical. So I think it is about trust. I think that's why companies like MoCaFi are so important, because we come from the community and we can say, hey, we've been there, done that. We've all gone to the check cash. We've gone to the pawn shops. We know the payday lenders, but we're trying to build something different. Let us earn your trust. And we're trying to be additive and not extractive, but you got to earn that every day to go against the narrative that so many of our communities have dealt with over these many years.
Mm-hmm. So there's so many questions, so I'm putting a few of these together, but a couple of people have asked about that whole education process with the communities and what you're doing to be able to bring people forward, understanding the problems with check cashing, payday lenders, and those types of things.
Yeah, so our strategy is a online and offline strategy, if you will. Online in terms of our mobile platform, and we have a really good library that's getting better of financial coaching. We've got blog posts, we've got videos, we've got courses, all that stuff. At the same time, there are a lot of wonderful organizations across the country that are providing necessary financial support, coaching, and other things in specific communities. And so what I really love about our municipal strategy, it gives us the opportunity to work with organizations like the YWCA or the United Way, or places like Covenant House, and that are really doing the work in communities, working with people day to day. I'll give you a great example. So we're working with Bed-Stuy Restoration Corporation, and that's a wonderful organization. It's a part of, ensuring that individuals within Bed-Stuy are a part of that evolution and don't get left behind as that community gentrifies. Mm-hmm. While they provide lots of wonderful financial literacy, both helping people prepare taxes and budgeting and the like, as well as with entrepreneurs, there are large numbers of people who don't have bank accounts. And we're partnering with them to ensure that some of the COVID relief dollars that they have to get to people who are in need, they get to them on our platform. And then we're able to reinforce the financial literacy that Bed-Stuy Restoration provides to its community. So it's those kinds of partnerships and thinking about working with community groups that we think is a home run in terms of reimagining banking and banking support for people in the communities that we care about.
I think we only perhaps have time for one more question. And I love this question, of course, because our investors are all about the impact and all about the return. Yeah. And so they say, how does MoCaFi make returns for its investors? if the banking through the platform has no fees, what's the revenue stream and how are we going to make money?
Oh, that's a great question. So there are three ways that we make money. First, because we're a mobile, we don't have the brick and mortar infrastructure. The key for us is everyone uses their debit card, and every time somebody swipes, that generates 140 basis points. And so our math is such that the average transaction we see generates the 140 basis points. On average, we're seeing $400 to $450 a month in revenue, in terms of charges, excuse me, and we see $7 to $10 a month of annual revenue per subscriber or per user. And then you multiply that by the number of people on the platform, it gets pretty interesting pretty quickly, and the leverage starts to come. So that's the benefit of not having the brick and mortar. So that's one. Second, each of the municipal and the average, the LTV of our users is about $175. And so, so that's one. Two, we get the same user. The municipality strategy is one that actually, because we stand up the infrastructure and we have partners with different cities, and the cities want to get dollars to the people that they serve, the cities end up paying us to acquire customers. So how neat is that, to have an LTV that I just described, and then you can have the right partnership where you get paid to bring on users. And I think the other piece, the third part of the revenue model, is as we build our customer base and people sort of see that this is a customer that needs a variety of products, not just banking, but it could be insurance, it could be investment, that we have a wonderful opportunity. It could be a mortgage, that if we're able to use our platform through partnership to get people the other products that they need, and we get paid as a distribution channel. So our economics get very interesting relatively quickly as we scale, and we're pretty excited about that. And you know, I like to kind of joke that we're the Chime for underserved communities, and last time I checked, Chime had a value of $5 billion. We're not there yet, but we have the exact same infrastructure and frame, but we're going after a market that has been underserved, which we think gives us an advantage.
Well, I have to tell you, in the chat already, people are asking for, they want part two of this conversation. They don't want it to end. And and so what we're going to do is we're going to take the questions, because there's many that we couldn't get to. It's always the case when you have such an amazing team of two people here in this great discussion. We'll send these to Wole and see if he can give some quick answers, and we will do a follow-up to this call. And hopefully this won't be the last time that you see Lisa Skeete Tatum with us as well. And Lisa, it's great to have you in Rising America. And we also have Daphne Dufresne on. I did see who's one of the lead investors, so we were giving them a little bit of break. So great to have Daphne. And a number of, I wish I could, there's so many people to shout out, but Merger and Acquisitions is with us as well today, who's been covering this topic, as well as Forbes Magazine, friends of ours from these different areas. So thank you for being here.